Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Gained the Knowledge of Everything Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Minato signed yet another paper while rubbing his head in anger. During the 3-year break, he had almost forgotten about this hell. It was the only part of his job that he didn't miss, which is funny because it was most of his job. The last 2 weeks have not been easy for him in any way. The forms kept getting filled out. As soon as he got back to work, he was given document after document. It seemed like the amount of work had grown while he was away. He did it with a smile, even though everyone knew he would. Well, that was as much of a smile as he could muster after everything that had been going on. Over the course of 2 weeks, the kids became impossible to deal with. When he got home every day, they wanted to spend time with him. During their training, they seemed to have grown used to him being there, so when he left, it threw their lives for a loop. Even though it hurt, he had to tell them no. Stress can only be handled for so long before someone breaks. After a week from the day of the reveal, he had Kushina back to her old self. Kushina was not like herself during the first week after Naruto left. The woman barely had a smile on her face, and for a while it looked like it was gone for good. Mito and Menma also saw that their mother had changed. After a week, they asked Minato if they were getting a divorce, which shows that they had the same idea as Naruto. Minato knew then that he had to talk to her about how she was making the kids feel. He made her sit down and listen to her go on and on about how bad of a mother she was and how she shouldn't have been allowed to have kids in the first place. He let her cry on his shoulder while she told him everything that was wrong. When she was done, he told her about what he had talked about with Naruto. He told Naruto that he wasn't really mad about the whole thing. When she didn't agree, he told her about his plan to take the whole family on a trip in a few months. As often as they could, they'd bring the blonde back into their daily lives, having him over for dinner, asking him for help with training the kids, or just spending time with them. Kushina wasn't back to being herself yet, but she was feeling a little better. She spent more and more time with her old friends, who she hadn't seen in a long time. A few days after Minato told them about her plan, she felt the need to ask for their advice. To do this, she had to be honest with them and risk being judged or being left out. Surprisingly, they were very helpful. Even though they were upset with her, they knew what had happened and could tell that her regret was real and not just a way to save face. By itself, that took a huge weight off Minato's shoulders. Now he knew for sure that his wife was telling someone about what had happened and getting help. It gave him hope that things would work out in the long run. Now, all he did was wait for his son to come back, which was still a source of stress for him. He looked over the mission details and saw that there was more than a small chance that they would meet some S-rank ninja. Their planned arrival time was 2 days ago, but even ANBU commanders often underestimated how long it would take to finish a mission. This was the first time he knew that one of his kids was actually on a mission. When Naruto was born, he had always pictured himself watching him leave the village for the first time. Having missed that chance, he couldn't wait to see the boy come back from the next one. Still, the idea that it would be from an ANBU mission is strange, but he would remember it for the rest of his life. As the hours went by and the day neared its end, so did his worry, just like it had the day before. He knew that not every day could be counted on, and that with ANBU, no matter how strong you are, you have few chances of getting back. His mind was put at ease when he watched the video of their Chunin exam battle. Itachi and Naruto were amazing in every way. He had never felt so proud in all his life. Not only did he enjoy seeing his son use his technique, but he also took pride in representing his family name, no matter how badly he was treated. He was completely astonished, to the point where he watched it every single day. If that was how strong they were a year ago, he was afraid of how strong they were now, especially with their ANBU training. They might have been getting close to the strongest couple in Konoha. That movie gave him peace of mind that they would be fine no matter who they were up against. There were a few exceptions, though. In the late hours of the night, 4 ANBU agents knelt before their cage. Minato stood up when he saw the one group he had been dying to see again. Ah, the 9th squad. He said it with a little more joy than he meant to. You're back. He made a joke as he looked down at the one he knew was Naruto because of his blonde hair. The 4 got up and stood at attention, waiting to be told to report. Minato, on the other hand, didn't even know everything about the situation yet. He was too busy looking at his son in his ANBU uniform to smile. You could see the pride in his eyes from miles away. He said wow a little louder than he meant to. The commander woke up when he coughed. Hokage-sama, I'm sorry, but I think it's time for a report. Minato shook his head and gave his son one last nod to show that he was proud of him. Right, I apologize. Please tell. He said this while sitting down. Hey, it started by talking about how they almost ran into a few missing S-rank ninja on their way up to Kusagakure. He also talked about what happened when they got there and the small things that happened while Naruto and Itachi were inside. When he had said everything he could, he gave the job to Itachi and Naruto. They then told what happened during their trip into the temple, including their short but brutal fight with the snake San and Orochimaru. When Minato heard about the snake, he sent a message to get Jiraiya from wherever he was. The group kept going with their report by talking about what happened after they gave the man back to his father and got paid. The S-rank nuke ninja made their trip home a lot more dangerous than their trip there. Jiraiya was brought into the room where Naruto and Itachi were asked to talk about their fight with the man again. It's rare for him to let go of someone with so much talent. Jiraiya thought about things as he leant against the window ceiling. He asked the boys, did he say anything else? No sir, Jiraiya-sama. Itachi spoke up. Just that he'd be coming to see us soon. Jiraiya stroked his chin while he was thinking. Maybe a danger to the village. He said at last. That's the only thing he knows for sure they will both agree on. Then I think you should start looking for him instead, she said. Minato said, don't try to find him until you know what he wants to do. Jiraiya said yes and jumped out the window to get ready to leave the village again. You four are out of here, he said. He said this as they bowed and said hi at the same time before leaving. Tora, please wait a second. He spoke up. Naruto stayed where he was and waited for everyone else to leave. Minato's smile grew 10 times bigger when it was just the two of them. Wow, look at you. He said this while firmly grabbing his shoulder. Naruto took off his mask and smiled while scratching the back of his head. Aw, Tusan, I'm glad you think well of me, my boy. And I envy you. He laughed, putting his hand on his head. I don't think it's true. How did the job go? Did you get hurt? He asked suddenly. No sir. In my fight with Orochimaru-san, I only got small cuts and bruises. He said this as he moved his now healed arm. I know a little bit about medical jutsu, so I was able to heal my wounds and a few that were done to Itachi. Minato was brought back again, if that was even possible, and his smile grew again. He was amazed. You even know medical jutsu. Wow, son, you already know more about ninja arts than I do. He gave praise. Naruto's shy smile got bigger as his father said nice things about him. Aw, Tusan, I don't know as much as you do yet. I'm just good enough at a lot of things. I haven't mastered any yet. He said this, kind of putting himself down. Oh, son, you're too modest. I mean, you know who my Hiraishin is. Jiraiya is a master of seals, but he hasn't done that yet. Minato continued. I suppose that's true, but I did it because of what you taught me. If I'm right, Jiraiya is trying to make the formula all over again from scratch. He said it once more. He is, you're right, but I can't say that I taught you. He said this with a smile that wavered a little but stayed strong. Naruto noticed and told him not to worry. I read how you made the seal by breaking down the formula of the Nidaime Tabarama Senju to make it much faster and better at fighting. From there, you went on to explain how it works and what to do the technique. I just did what you told me to do. Minato just looked at his shy son and smiled. He didn't think he deserved the praise, but he knew that if he turned it down, the boy would just argue another point. Well, you're almost as good as this old guy. That's certain. He said this with a laugh. Tusan, I'm not sure about that. But, if you say so. Naruto was done. Minato gave his son another nod, and his eyes were still full of pride. Minato looked at how much he reminded him of himself when he was in ANBU. There was silence for a few seconds. Even though he was a lot older than Naruto, the two looked very much alike. He stood up straight and said, well, you must be tired. Yes, sir. A few days of jumping from tree to tree have worn me down a lot. A good night's sleep will give me all the energy I need. Naruto spoke up. Well, don't let me keep you. He said this as he put out his arm. Naruto smiled and gave his father a nod as he shook his hand. Oh, and if you want to come over for breakfast in the morning, your mother would love to have you. He said as Naruto left the room. Naruto slowed down and nodded his head. Yes, that does sound great. He said this as he walked out the door. What time would be good for me to show up? Oh, well, maybe 9. Minato spoke up. Naruto nodded again. Yes, sir. I'll be there. He smiled and waved back at the other person. Minato smiled and waved back with his own hand. Something was making his heart beat fast. He felt something warm in his chest that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Things would get better from here on out. He was sure of it. The next morning, Naruto walked up the stone path to the front door of his old house, hiding his face behind a black book. His white namikaze jacket went with his black pants and shirt, which were his everyday clothes. When he knocked on the door, he heard his sister say in a girly voice, I got it. He waited a few more seconds while he listened to her little feet run toward the door. When it opened, she looked into his eyes. She said, It's Nai-san. "Hello Naruto." Naruto was met as he walked in. She asked him, "Are you here to eat breakfast with us?" Naruto was done kicking off his shoes. "Yes I am." He gave her a smile. She smiled in return. "Kasen made a big breakfast today." She said this as she pulled him toward the kitchen by the hand, as if he didn't know where it was. Minato and Menma were already at the table in the room, waiting to eat when the two walked in. When they looked at Naruto, he smiled. "Hey, Nai-san, I saved a seat for you." Menma yelled out and patted the seat next to him in a firm way. Naruto smiled and walked over to him. "Thanks, Otaudo," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Tusan." "Good morning." As Minato stood up to shake his hand, he answered, "Your mother will be out soon. She just went back into the kitchen to get the rest of the food." As Naruto looked that way, he said, "I believe I can help." As he walked into the kitchen, he said, he saw his mother standing at the counter with her back to the door. She was moving her hands around, not sure what to bring first. "Good morning, Kasen." Naruto smiled at the person. As Kushina turned around, she let out a low yelp. "Hello, Naruto-kun." She said this with a smile that was clearly fake to hide how nervous she was. She was surprised when the blonde boy who was almost as tall as her walked up to her and gave her a hug. "Here," he told her to get the extra pair of pot holders he had seen. "Let me help you." He took one of the last two dishes she had on the counter and carried it out with Kushina right behind him. "Ugh, the food is here at last." Mito let out a shout of relief. "I'm starving." Menma, always trying to annoy her, said, "You're always hungry." All it took to start their first fight of the day was that. As usual, the others were not paying attention as Kushina and Naruto set down the last two dishes. As soon as they sat down, everyone started getting their own food. For a while, Menma and Mito didn't say anything as they continued to argue around the bites of food they were eating. Naruto, Minato, and Kushina just looked different ways as they listened. Minato looked like he didn't care, Kushina was embarrassed, and Naruto was laughing. Naruto came in the end. "Man, you two fight a lot, don't you?" The first person to answer was Mito. "It's Baka Menma's fault. He always makes me mad." She said this as she stuffed more food into her mouth. "Sure thing. She always starts trouble." He said it wasn't true, even though it was clear that he was the one who started it this time. Kushina tried to get people's attention by pushing her hair out of her face and coughing into her hand. "Menma, please speak in a quieter tone." Menma knew it was meant to be much more threatening than it sounded, so he leaned back a little in his chair. Naruto saw how strong his mother was and laughed at how strong she was. "You know, Kasen." Getting her attention was what he said. "You might be the most frightening mom in Konoha." She gave a shy smile because she knew it was a compliment. However, some of the Nara kids might say it's really Yoshino-sama. Kushina smiled. "Oh, if you get to know Yoshino, she's pretty nice." "Indeed. I've only met her briefly. But when I did, she was holding a frying pan and looking for her son, Shikamaru. I'm sure that when she caught him, it wasn't a good thing," he said smiling. Kushina was happy to hear that. Then, Minato decided to add in, "I'd also include Mikoto in that bet." "What? Mikoto-chan isn't all that bad," Kushina said. Minato had a laugh. Well, I've heard tales." Kushina, too, laughed. She knew that her best friend could be a little scary at times, but not too much. Once the conversation got going at the family breakfast, nothing went wrong for the rest of the time. They talked about everything from Minato and Kushina's old missions to Naruto's first mission. For a short time, they were a normal family like they were meant to be. Just knowing that was enough to put Kushina's mind at ease. During the first half of the meal, she was still a little nervous about Naruto's lack of concern for his neglect. But by the end, she felt like they were closer than ever, which, of course, they were. Minato finally had to go to work, leaving Kushina, the kids, and the rest of the family at home. After eating, they felt stronger and asked Kushina if they could show Naruto how strong they had become. Kushina said no at first, telling them that Naruto was too tired because he had just come back from a 2-week mission. But Naruto told her it was fine. Break. Now, all three were standing in the backyard. Kushina sat on the porch and watched Menma and Mito fight with their older brother. Their older brother, like Kakashi, pulled out a book to read to make them angry. She laughed at their angry faces because she thought it was funny that they still let it bother them. At least one of their moves showed how well they worked together. Mito went around Naruto so that they could attack him from different angles. "Don't think too little of us, Nai-san," yelled Menma as he charged at Nai-san with a kunai in his hand. Naruto smiled and easily grabbed the kunai out of the air without looking up. He heard Mito jump out of the way as he threw it over his shoulder. Naruto shifted his body slightly to block Menma's wild haymaker. This caused the blonde to fly over his shoulder and into his sister. "Ugh, Menma Baka, don't stand in my way." As she charged the blonde with his back to her, she yelled and pushed him over. She tried to give him a roundhouse kick from behind, but he just put up his free hand to block it. He grabbed her ankle and gave her a gentle pull as she flipped over to get back on her feet. Menma tried to give Naruto a drop kick, but Naruto dodged it. Mito was going to give Menma an axe kick, but he didn't see it coming. Her heel hit him right in the chest. Stop beating me, you idiot," he screamed at her. "Then get out of the way," she yelled back. She jumped to her feet and took a taijutsu stance against Naruto. Naruto didn't do anything but keep reading. When Mito ran at her target, she pulled out a kunai in the middle of her path. Still not looking, Naruto dodged each of her attacks as he poked and tapped at the back of her hand, which she found to be useless. That was, until she dropped her kunai and tried to punch him in the face instead. Naruto didn't dodge it. She jammed 3 of her fingers when she did this. She jumped back when she realized her hand wouldn't close for no clear reason. Menma then came in with a full power Rasengan. Naruto was ready for the attack and moved slightly out of the way before jabbing Menma in the arm. Right away, the ball of chakra broke apart and he fell forward. As he tried to catch himself, he saw that he could only move his left arm. His right wouldn't move, and he could no longer even feel it. He looked at Mito, who was still holding her hand but not moving it. Without saying a word, they both knew that the other was finished, and Naruto knew it too. "You two are pretty good. Most people in your class could not beat you on your own. But you don't work well with others. So bad that I don't think you would be able to fight well in any situation." They both felt bad and looked down. Teamwork is the main way that Konoha works. When it's time for you to become an active ninja, it will be your most valuable skill. "He's right, both of you. Your father has already told you this." From the side, Kushina added, Naruto saying it should make that point clear. "Yes, Kasan." Both replied at the same time. When an ANBU agent landed next to Naruto, everyone was surprised. He told him something in his ear, which Naruto acknowledged with a nod. When the man ran away, Naruto spoke to the other people. "It looks like I've been asked to go somewhere else." He said this as he walked up to Mito and Menma and grabbed their hands and shoulders. His hands were wrapped in green chakra. When it was over, they looked at their wounds and were shocked to find that they could move them again. Naruto walked back to the porch to say good morning to his mother. "Thank you, Kasan, for making such a great breakfast. It was just as good as I remembered." He gave her a warm hug. "Thank you, Naruto. You are always welcome to come hang out with us, whenever you want." He smiled and nodded as she answered. He waved as he left the compound and went to do whatever he was called to do. So Kushina, Mito, and Menma had to come up with a new plan to keep training. Try to work as a team. After a few hours, the night sky swallowed up what was left of Konoha's daily life, making way for bar hopping and late-night dinner dates. Around this time, Naruto and Itachi were leaving the ANBU headquarters. After listening to briefing after briefing for a whole day, the two were tired and hungry. They walked toward the side of town where many family-friendly restaurants and stands were located. They were still talking about the things they had been told about during the hour-long meeting. It was a last-minute event that everyone had to go to. Originally, it was just to congratulate and send off Kenji Horo, who had just retired from the ANBU as captain. He was giving the title to Commander Amaru Yosha, who had been one of his students and was now one of their top officers. From there, the speaker decided that was the best time to not only remind the group of the rules Shikaku Nara made while he was acting Hokage, but also to tell them about the rules the Yondaime had added. Naruto kept wondering how long his father had been working on something like that. Now that all of that nonsense was over, the two boys were on their way to get something to eat. They just didn't know where to go. When they were looking for a place to eat because they were so hungry, they ran into someone who made Itachi wish they hadn't. "Hey Itachi-kun." A girl with black hair and eyes said this as she and a man who looked just like her walked up to the two people. "Hello, Naruto-san." "Izumi." "Hello." Itachi saw that Naruto's smile, which was friendly, had a hint of sneakiness in it. What a pleasant surprise. Itachi saw the blonde's eyes sparkle from the side of his own, but he chose not to react because doing so might have made the blonde do something he didn't want. "Hello, Izumi-chan, Komiyu-san." He said this to her and to her dad. "Hello to you, too, Itachi and Naruto," he said. With a smile, the man said, "Why are you two still out at this hour?" Itachi asked out of interest. Izumi looked like she was a little hurt by the question. "Well, it's my birthday, so Tusan was showing me a new trick." When the girl's birthday was mentioned, Itachi's body almost didn't change at all. In all the chaos of the day, he had forgotten all about it. He tried to act like he didn't care, so he just nodded and hoped no one would notice. Obviously, he knew for sure that one person did it. Well, Naruto spoke up to break the awkward silence that had fallen after Itachi's answer. I wish you a happy birthday. I'm sorry, but as we were walking to our meeting this morning, I almost completely forgot about the happy event. It was almost a given, since Itachi kept bugging me about it the whole time. He said that what he did for his friend was perfect. Itachi thanked his friend in his mind for being so helpful and aware. He saw Izumi's eyes light up with joy when her dad laughed. He couldn't say anything, so he just smiled and agreed with the story Naruto had made up to cover his tracks. Tomio-sama, as a way to make it up to Izumi and thank Itachi for reminding me, I'd like to ask if your daughter could join us for dinner tonight. Naruto asked, as he always did when he wanted to sound smart. Tomio looked at Izumi's tears and then at the two boys' faces. I'd say no if it were someone else, but I'm sure she's in good hands with Itachi and the son of the Yondaime, he said with a nod. You kids have fun. After saying that, he walked away, leaving the three kids standing in the street. Two of them were embarrassed, and the other was confused. Break. At the Akimichi Bar and Grill, they all sat in a booth. Naruto sat on one side of the room, and Izumi and Itachi sat on the other, trying not to look at each other. Itachi had bought Naruto a book, and Naruto was once again stuck in it. Itachi was cursing the book for making the blonde so interested in it. It was a bit of a paradox, because Naruto could start any conversation with ease, but he hadn't met many people outside of books, so he didn't know what questions or topics to ask or talk about in different situations. He was afraid that the blonde would start talking and that he would say or ask Izumi something stupid that would make them look bad as a couple. One fear he wouldn't admit to was that if he asked her that question, she'd answer about someone else. He looked at her hand, which was on the table, and saw that there were some burn marks around her fingers. He smiled because he had been hurt in the same way and knew right away what she was working on. The food finally came, which both made him happy and made him feel bad. He felt bad because he knew that Naruto's table manners wouldn't let him read during a meal. It wasn't wrong to read at the table, but it was rude to read once the food came. When the waitress gave each person their own plate and left, everyone at the table was quiet. The only sounds were the clinks of their glasses and the conversations of the other people in the bar. Naruto hadn't noticed because he was reading a very good part of his book. The silence was very awkward, and he could feel how uncomfortable they all were. Because he knew a lot about the situation, he thought of a joke. Since everyone at the table had something in common with Itachi, he would use him as the main point. So, Izumi-san, he began, you're 12 years old at last. Izumi ate what was in her mouth and then spit it out so she could answer. Yes, I am, she said, nodding her head and covering her mouth so that no food would fly out. She said that she was glad someone had finally spoken up. So, that just leaves little Itachi here, right? He asked, indicating the boy's age, which made Izumi laugh. Itachi killed the infamous Eichen from the Uchiha clan right away. Just another 3 weeks, he thought. Oh, you're still a baby for 3 more weeks. Izumi said this, and the blonde across the table laughed and the brunette gave her a deadpan look. It looks like I'm the most grown-up person at this table. He said it with a face of indifference, but they could both hear a hint of amusement or relief in his voice. Besides, neither of you are much older than me, he said. Astute observation. Naruto made a remark. I'm just kidding. When you're older, you'll understand. He said this as he and Izumi laughed at Itachi's angry look. As he's been doing more and more lately, Naruto was able to break the tense silence that was around the table when they sat down. Then, when things got going and he was done eating, he pulled out his book and spent the next hour or two just listening to the two flirt with each other. He thought it was interesting to see up close. Love was starting to grow right in front of his eyes. In a book he read, the author wrote that love is when our human minds become over-infatuated with another person to a degree that is dangerous from a self-implosion point of view. This was the author's own explanation of what love is. Naruto took that to mean that falling in love was the same as making sure you would die. For if you fell in love with someone weaker than you and then lost them, your judgment would be clouded and you wouldn't be the same person you used to be. You would only fight for one thing. Vengeance. From where he was sitting, Naruto could see that it was a possibility that seemed to be happening right now. Part of him didn't want their relationship to grow, not because he was jealous, but to keep his best friend safe. In this world, he didn't have many real friends, so he couldn't lose this one. Having Itachi as a friend made Naruto think that men could be more than the self-centered and cruel people he had seen before. Itachi is a killer, after all. Not a murder, just a man doing what he was told, but still a killer. Naruto thought Itachi was a light in this dark world he had grown used to, even though he had taken many lives to keep the parts of himself that make him human. Itachi gave him the strength to see past his pain and sorrow and look forward. The next generation is what lies ahead. Before he met Itachi, Naruto was a mean person. He didn't say it out loud, but he was a very negative person. For a little boy who lived alone, it was bound to happen. Then he met the boy who didn't smile but loved a lot. For a while, they fought over their different ideas, but then Naruto saw something so beautiful that his heart felt warm in a way it hadn't in years. A new way to look at the bad things that happened every day. Ironically, it happened just a few days after their first kill, which was the day he thought Itachi would agree with him and realize how cruel and violent people are, something he had read about himself. As he followed his partner, he was surprised to see him talking to people as if nothing had happened. He thought that, like the first day, Itachi would go off by himself. He thought he would go far away from his family because he was afraid they would see what a monster he had become. He thought like a child, so he thought Itachi was just stupid to the core. He felt like he couldn't figure out what he had done. When he had the chance, he went up to him and got into a heated argument, trying to make him feel like a monster like he did. Itachi only said that he wasn't there. When he got up and started to walk away, Naruto almost had to go after him. When they finally stopped, they were on a cliff with a view of the forest. Naruto had no idea why they were all up there. He did nothing but watch the brunette stare out the window at nothing. He asked Itachi what they should be looking for, but all he said was, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Naruto tried to see what he was talking about, but all he saw were trees with wounds and people yelling at each other. When he told Itachi about it, he just smiled and said, "You see only what you want to see. But it's important to point out that you know what ugly looks like, so you must also know what beauty looks like." With those wise words, he turned and walked away, leaving the blonde on top of the cliff with a much better understanding of what was going on than he had before. It's like saying that there can't really be darkness if there is no light to compare it to. When he heard those words, he thought about everything he had grown to hate. He didn't like it when people fought, but then he remembered how happy people were when they were in love. He hated to see people die. But he remembered when Mito and Menma were born. He hated that his family had left him alone, but he remembered how much fun they had together in the past. He came to his own conclusion about what it means to be a person. We only hate something we used to love very much. And if you used to love something very much, all you have to do to forgive is remember what you used to love. Naruto was worried about his friend, but he couldn't have been happier for him. For the first time, he got to see his friend truly happy. He has noticed that something is getting harder to find. In another book that he read, the author said that love is the emotional embodiment of peak human strength. At the same time, it is also our biggest weakness, a true paradox in every way. In both cases, he saw what happened after someone died. It was never said outright, but it was clear both times. He worked in a field where death was common, so he knew better than most that death hurts the living more than the dead. But as he spent more time with them in less awkward settings, he also got close to Izumi. So, the worry that one of them would die got a lot worse. A head of silver hair sticking out of a booth not far from theirs pulled him out of his thoughts. He almost called out to the man because he thought it was Kakashi. When the man got up, it was not him. He went back to reading, glad he didn't have to talk to that awkward person. Izumi getting to her feet again stopped him from thinking. Time is running out. I better get home. She smiled and waved to the two boys. Thank you so much, everyone. I've had more fun than this all day. Naruto smiled and gave her a nod. Itachi, on the other hand, got up. I'll walk you to your house. He said this as they said goodnight to Naruto. Naruto thanked him and then went home himself. He was excited to see how their relationship would grow. He thought it was something very dangerous. 2 years later, Naruto, who was now 14, was standing outside the academy with his hands in his pockets. His appearance hadn't changed much in the last 2 years. Actually, nothing had changed. The only big changes are that he has grown taller and lost the jacket he used to love. He just got too big for it, so he gave it to Minato to give to Menma when he got bigger. The only thing that had changed was that he had moved. His hair was still the same, with the right side still shorter than the rest. He kept wearing his black t-shirt, ANBU pants, and black sandals. His necklace with the Uzumaki spiral symbol, which was a gift from his mother for his birthday a few months ago, was the only thing that changed about his look. You could argue that the new book he shoved in his face was another addition. After reading and rereading the one he got from his friend all those years ago for so long, people started to associate it with his clothes. This book was green. As he read his new book, he noticed that the parents and other adults were talking and whispering among themselves in amazement. Turning around to see what was going on, he saw Itachi walking toward him. The brown-haired girl had not changed at all. He still wore the same Uchiha high-collared shirt, ANBU pants, and sandals, and he still had that ponytail. Only his reputation in the village changed. Itachi became the perfect example of a Konoha shinobi. Everyone in the village knew about his accomplishment of becoming ANBU commander at the young age of 13. Just a few months ago. Since then, his popularity was almost as high as the Hokage's, which most people said meant he was close to reaching that position. Itachi said, "Hello, Naruto," while leaning against the wall next to the blonde and waving to the parents waiting for their kids to get out. Naruto answered, "Hello to you, too, Itachi," without looking up from his book. "Here for Sasuke. Yes, my mother is also going to Yoshino baby-sama's shower," he said as the blonde nodded. That's why he was going to spend the rest of the day with Mito and Menma. Itachi asked, "What do you have planned for them?" Naruto looked up and was thinking, "I don't know. I thought there would be some training and maybe something to eat later. Would you mind if Izumi and I came along? We're also watching Sasuke for the day." Naruto nodded. "Of course. I have to admit that I wasn't too interested in trying to keep Mito and Menma entertained all day, at least not by myself," Itachi said with a laugh. He knew what he meant. The doors of the academy opened with a loud slam. One by one, the kids went home with their parents or started walking home with their friends. Everyone stopped to watch the show Itachi Uchiha put on. In the end, the class where all of the clan children were kept was finally let out. Sasuke was one of the first kids to go out. After greeting Naruto, Itachi said that they were going to go ahead and pick up Izumi, and that they'd meet up later. Naruto stood there with his book in his hand, not knowing that people were staring at him. When Mito and Menma finally came out, they started telling everything about their day. Naruto just listened all the way back to the Namikaze compound, pretending to be interested. When they got there, Naruto had them do their normal warm-up routine while he read his book. This was the first part of their training. After they were done, he told them to work on controlling their chakras by doing the tree climbing exercise while balancing a leaf on their foreheads. They were disappointed because they had hoped for something more dangerous, or at least fresh. To get them to work twice as hard, he told them that if they worked hard enough, he would show them a technique so amazing that it could beat anyone in seconds. He was, of course, blowing smoke, but they didn't need to know that. It did what it was supposed to do, which was to make them work twice as hard as they would have. When everything was said and done, Itachi, Izumi, and Sasuke finally joined them. "Okay, guys," Naruto said as he climbed down from the tree where he had been resting. "I think that's enough training for now," he said. "What?" Menma yelled, still panting. "What about our super amazing technique?" Naruto smiled as he looked at Itachi. "Yeah, that. Well, that's for another day. You guys are too tired now, and besides, we're going to go eat." Sasuke whispered to Itachi, "What is the technique?" Itachi just laughed and never answered in a formal way. Mito asked, "Naruto Niai, are you going to drive us to the party?" Naruto just looked at her and wondered. She told him, "It's Ino's birthday, and they're having a party at the Akamichi Grill House." Menma said, "No, I don't want to go there. It's just a group of stupid girls." Mito yelled back, "You're stupid." This started a new verbal fight between the two, which the others ignored. Naruto sighed and looked at Sasuke to decide who would win. "What do you think, Sasuke? Do you want to go to the party, or would you rather we go somewhere else to eat?" Sasuke, at first, was going to say no, but the look Mito gave him told him she'd be heartbroken if he did. He didn't really care about her, but he didn't want to make a girl cry. "I guess it wouldn't hurt. Maybe we will see some of our friends there too," he said, directing that last sentence at Menma, who crossed his arms in defeat. The group then moved on to the Akamichi Grill House. Break. When the group finally got there, the happy birthday song was just ending. They saw that everyone else had probably already eaten when the cake came out. "Well," Naruto said, "we could just get a table and order then." "But, Nyai-san," Mito said, looking up at him, "I want cake." "Imato, you haven't eaten yet, so it wouldn't be wise to." Itachi said, "Oh, Naruto, just let them eat cake for dinner." Naruto looked down at Mito's pleading eyes and at Menma, who was trying to be angry but was looking over at the big cake out of hunger. "I guess it wouldn't be so bad," he told them as they left. When the three ran into the party section, one of the mom's helpers gave them a party hat and a plate so they could get their slice. Naruto and the Uchiha couple found a seat towards the back of the restaurant. Naruto sat with his back against the wall so he could watch his two younger siblings. It's hard to do that now that the book is in his face. Itachi and Izumi were having their own conversation over something he had no interest or knowledge in, so he just continued reading. He would look up every so often to make sure everything was still okay. He thought he'd seen Kakashi a few times, but he couldn't get a good enough look. As usual, Naruto joined in the conversation while they ate, but then he disappeared into his book, leaving the two to talk about their own things again in a way that was almost private. After a few minutes, Naruto looked over at the party again and wondered when it would be over. He thought that since they were late, it would be over quickly, but they were still fighting. He put his nose back in his book and kept reading until he heard the sound of a child running towards their table. When he looked up, Mito and another girl were running up to the table, and the Hyuga heiress was being dragged along. Mito yelled, "Naruto Nyai," as she and the other two girls stood up from their table. Itachi and Izumi stopped talking to see what was going on. She said happily, "I want you to meet my friends." Naruto raised an eyebrow. She tried to sound like him and said, "I always tell you to meet them, but you always say you're too busy." Naruto put the book down with a smile on his face. "Okay, then," he said, sitting up straighter. The girl with pink hair was the first to answer. She held out her hand to the blonde and said, "My name is Sakura Haruno." She said with a grimace, "Nice to meet you. I hope you're better than that Baka Menma." Naruto gave her a smile. "It's nice to meet you, Sakura-san. My name is Naruto," he said, ignoring her comment about his brother and assuming she was one of Menma's prank victims. After that, everyone sat in silence until Mito could take it no longer. She said, "Ugh, come on, Hinata. He won't bite." Hinata came out slowly from behind the red head. "I am Hinata Hyuga," she said, almost whispering her last name. Naruto also put out his hand, which she took hesitantly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Hinata-san," Naruto said with a smile that put a smile on her face. Mito said, "There," with a smile. "Now you know all of my friends except Ino, who went to the bathroom," she said, craning her neck around the room to look for the blonde. When she did, she called her over right away. "Ino, come here." Everyone looked at her for a second before Mito started talking again. As Ino walked over to the table, her heart was racing in a way that reminded her more of Hinata than she was comfortable with. On her way, she quickly ripped the birthday hat off her head and threw it on a nearby table while she fixed her hair. When she finally got there, she waited for Mito to finish whatever she was saying while she quietly looked at the boy who had broken her confidence without her even knowing it. With a soft smile, his eyes were fixed on Mito, and she couldn't help but look at him. Mito said, "And this, which woke her up, is Ino or the birthday girl?" She took her hand out from behind her back and waved briefly, not at anyone at the table. She whispered "Hey" in a way that was so out of character for her that Mito looked at her funny. Izumi seemed excited when she asked Ino, "Oh, so you're the birthday girl?" Ino nodded. She gushed over how innocent the blonde was and said, "That's so cute." In other words, it was a big insult to her age. "What is your age?" she answered after clearing her throat so she wouldn't stutter. 10, Izumi said with a smile. "Well, happy birthday." "I too wish you a happy birthday," Itachi added. Ino said thank you quickly and tucked her bangs behind her ear. Mito said, "Ino," which got her attention. She looked at her and saw that she was pointing to Naruto. "This is Naruto, my older brother." Naruto was already reaching out to shake the girl's hand. "It's nice to meet you," he said, but had to stop because the girl with very shaky hands had knocked over his almost empty cup of water, which was now running down his leg. "Oh no," said Ino in fear. "I'm sorry." Luckily, the cup wasn't full, so there wasn't much of it. Naruto just ignored her. "It is quite alright. It was only a bit of water. No harm done," he said, extending his hand again. This time, Ino reached out much more gently so she wouldn't embarrass herself even more. "Happy birthday, Ino-san. If I'm not mistaken, it looks like your father is getting ready to leave," he said, giving her a way out. She looked over and saw that he was paying the bill. She quickly told the group goodbye and ran after him. Mito only raised an eyebrow at the strange thing that was happening. She'd never seen the blonde act that way before. She said to herself, weird. After 3 years, a member of the ANBU looked into the window of a remote house from a tree. The screaming inside was hard to hear because of the rain. His shape was completely hidden by the shadow of the top of the tree above him. Only short flashes of lightning occasionally lit up his form. His black sword was held backwards in his hand. The men guarding the house walked in a very strict pattern, and the rain didn't bother them at all. Their weapons were held carelessly, waiting for someone to be stupid enough to attack. They didn't know that death was just 10 feet away. He was shifting his feet, getting ready to pounce. When he did, they weren't even aware that they were gone. He went for the guy closest to him first, cut his throat, and then picked up his body and put it down gently. Then he jumped up to where the other person was standing. When the guard turned around, he was a long way away. At that exact moment, there was a flash of lightning that briefly lit up the ANBU and the sword that was flying toward his head. The very last thing he would see. The ANBU ran by, ripped the man's sword out of his head, and then jumped feet first through the tiny window. When he landed, he realized how lucky he was because a guard had just passed by 5 seconds before he jumped in and was already walking away. He sneaked up on him from behind and broke his neck in one smooth move. He put the body in a closet nearby and went on in silence. From the basement of the mansion, he could hear a man screaming. He made his way towards it, killing 2 more guards on his way. He heard the man's scream stop all of a sudden. After finding the target, he moved on and opened the door gently. When he got inside, he saw a brown-haired man in a lab coat cleaning up materials from the last experiment he was doing. He walked in quietly. When the doctor went to put his scalpel on the wooden nightstand, a kunai stabbed him in the hand, pinning him to the floor and making him scream in pain. The man turned around and took the knife out of his hand as he moved around the table. He took out a tag and tied it around the kunai. At the top of the ceiling, there was a small hole that led outside. He threw it as hard as he could while aiming right. He was horrified when it was pulled out of the air. Horror, because it was an explosive tag that was supposed to wake up his dead guards. He watched as the ANBU held the blade in his hand. For a moment, it gave off a blue light, but then the man dropped it without thinking. Yakotoshi, you have been sentenced to death by the Council of Konoha for kidnapping and killing more than 100 people who lived in the Land of Fire, the man was told. The black blade then cut his head cleanly off with a quick slash, ending the man's pleas. When his job was done, the ANBU left the mansion and went into the trees, leaving behind only a few dead bodies that had been set on fire. Break. Hours later, the ANBU agent stood in front of his locker, stripping his armor from his body. His mask was the last thing he took off. He was now standing in his regular clothes, a set that had not changed since he was young. His necklace hung in the middle of his chest, and he wore a black t-shirt, black pants, and black sandals. He shut his locker with tiredness in his eyes and a sore body to go with it. The 17-year-old walked out of the locker room and down the gray hall until he reached the head commander's quarters, where he was told to go when he came back. He knocked on the door without saying anything, waiting for the signal to come in. When the voice called out to him, he opened the door and slowly walked in. He sat in the chair across the desk from the man. Captain Yosha, who was bald and had coal black eyes, pierced his own blues with a fake bravado that tried to hide his sympathy. Namikaze, he started, but stopped when he couldn't find the words he was looking for. He was lost in the cold seas in the teen's eyes. How are you doing? He asked suddenly. The blonde didn't move at all and didn't even blink. I'm fine, Captain Yosha, he said, changing his tone a little bit. His lack of body language made it sound much creepier than he meant it to. How's it going? The captain looked at him with interest, but he didn't try to hide that he didn't believe him. I'm fine. Naruto, you're here today because a few of your teammates are worried about working with you. They say you've become more reckless than you usually are. Naruto held his face, which didn't move. He said, what a strange complaint. Well, until you see Inoichi-san for an evaluation, I'm afraid I have to put you on leave, Captain Yosha said, noticing the blonde's jaw tightening just a little bit. Once you pass your evaluation, you can go back to work. Please return your mask. He said this as he started to fill out paperwork, making it clear that the conversation was not up for debate. Naruto thought for a few more seconds as he kept looking at the wall. As he stood up, he took his mask out of the pouch on his back and put it on his desk. Good day, Captain Yosha, he said as he turned to leave. But all he got in response was a grunt. Break. As he walked down the street, he looked up at the rain falling from the sky. He closed his eyes to keep the falling drops from getting in them. He walked along in silence with his hands in his pockets and no idea of where he was going. Nothing to keep him busy. Another day of being completely worn out, feeling undeniably drained, yet being unable to keep himself from doing something, anything that could cloud his mind. The last 3 years have been the busiest in his life. It was expected, however, as his family was very unique. It seemed to start when Mito and Menma became genin last year. They were thrown on a team with Sasuke, of course, and were handed over to Kakashi. Their first-year students' performance on the Chunin exams made them famous in the village just a few months ago. The event went off without a hitch, and, surprisingly, the semifinals were full of very good matches. In the end, his brother won against all of the other competitors. Other than that, the kids always seemed to get into some very interesting fights. The list went on and on, from fighting off a rank ninja to saving important people. Life went on and on, no matter what happened. Naruto has known and felt a lot of different feelings over the years. He's felt fear, anger, joy, content, happiness. But the one thing he lacked to a very extreme degree was love. It had been missing from his heart as he watched others get caught up in it. Seeing Itachi and Izumi move in together and his younger brother slowly fall in love with the girl with pink hair that he had met all those years ago. Even Sasuke and Mito's budding relationship. Naruto thought that love was everywhere, but he couldn't get it, for he was always with people who were better than him, whether it be Itachi, Menma, or even his father who seemed to just refuse to age. He had already accepted it a long time ago. He was jealous, not of their boyfriends or girlfriends, but of how much attention they got. He was just as skilled as everyone else, but no one saw him, heard him, or even really paid attention to him. It was just like before. He was never anyone's top priority or main focus, and this kept happening over and over again in his life. It was a selfish desire he had a few years back, when there weren't any other problems to focus on. He didn't understand why that was the case. Why is it that certain things become problems due to a simple lack of conflict? When he was in a bad mood, his problems went a lot deeper than a lack of affection. But as soon as he accepted that part of himself, he became obsessed with little things. It seems like we humans like to struggle more than anything else. It was a possible explanation for most of what we do. We look for love because, in the long run, love always leads to some kind of conflict. We go to war in hopes of staying alive long enough to tell our stories, all to show how strong we are by getting through more traumatic experiences than anyone else, as if that would make you a better person than the person you are trying to put down. He had a crazy idea, but it was something that could be true. No matter what, he wanted that kind of interaction with people more than anything else. He wanted to be important to someone in some way. He wanted the people of the village to like him as much as they liked Itachi. He was 11 when he got to ANBU, so where were his congratulations? He wanted to be respected like Menma, whose last name was the same as his own. Since he looked just like the person they thought he was, why wasn't he treated like a celebrity? Did he make a mistake by feeling that way? If you'd asked him a few months ago, the answer would have been a resounding yes. Being so self-centered was a terrible thing to do. His friend's positive attitude twisted his mind into a kind of newfound naivety that he didn't think he ever had before. Itachi's words to him that day were misinterpreted. To Naruto, Itachi was saying to always look towards the positive side of things instead of focusing on the negative. After a few weeks of practicing the new tactic, it became second nature. It became a part of his mentality altogether. Now he knew that Itachi wasn't telling him to just think about the good things. He was saying to look towards the positive while being aware of the negative. Naruto just cut the latter off completely, blinding himself from the world around him. But, just like the character in his new book, the world just seemed to laugh at him. His new book pretty well explained his situation. All the bad things that kept happening to him broke him down mentally and physically. A constant stream of misfortune that seemed too chronological to be random. The world was punishing him for something he had never done. He didn't understand why or what to do because of it. The main idea of the book was that the bad guy showed how easy it is for a normal man to become just like him. How simple it is to lose one's mind. It was a detective novel, of course, that involved the protagonist searching high and low for the insane man. But for some reason, the antagonist stole the story. It was a dark book that discussed a lot of topics going on in today's society, and the great wars of the past. Naruto had read it at least 100 times through since he got it. He was reading it right now, and he knew every line and page by heart. He loved the story because it was so unusual. When he finally stopped, he was in front of the building where interrogations took place and where psychological tests were also done. He trudged into the building, not worried about the wet state of his clothes as he noticed the ground was wet regardless. He walked through the building until he reached the office of Inoichi Yamanaka, the head psychiatrist. He knocked on the door. Hearing the muffled enter from inside, he opened the door. Inoichi was finishing up some paperwork when he quickly looked up and saw the blonde. "Ah, Naruto," he said, finishing the document. Naruto took a seat in the chair in front of his desk. Just as he had earlier that morning, he waited patiently, motionlessly. When Inoichi finally set his paperwork aside, he sat up straighter in his seat with his fingers interlocked on the desk in front of him. "I didn't think I would see you so soon." "Hello, Inoichi-san." Naruto greeted the man, still that false fluctuation riddling his voice that just did not go well with the frozen look he displayed. Inoichi looked at the boy carefully to see if there were any physical signs that could get in the way of the exam. He didn't have to look far, as his eyes said it all. He looked like he hadn't been to bed in days. Inoichi started by asking the boy if he wanted to talk about something else before he sent him on his way. "So, what can I help you with? I was told to receive an evaluation from yourself, Inoichi-san. A few of my co-workers fear I am unfit to serve," he explained. Inoichi just looked at him carefully. He looked at the boy's body and noticed all the little things that told him something was wrong. Nodding his head slowly, Inoichi pulled his documents back to the center of his desk. "Well, I'm sorry to say that I can't give you a good assessment. You're too tired to make a good guess. How about you come back next week, and we'll do it then." "I am fine, Inoichi-san," Naruto said in hopes of changing his mind. Inoichi nodded as he went back to signing documents. "I am sure. We'll find out next week." Days later, he laid in his bedroom, staring at his ceiling from the surface of his bed. The last few days kind of ran together into one big day. He hadn't left his apartment since leaving Inoichi's office that night. There was nowhere to go, no one to see. He refused to walk through the streets anymore as all that awaited him were side glances and chatter that he just knew were about him. The new pariah of the village he was. Only his family could help him, which wasn't much when they were all gone. Jiraiya and Kushina took Mito and Menma on a training trip for an undetermined period of time. They had been gone for a few months, so they had missed a lot of things. What was it that happened? Well, the deaths of Itachi and Izumi Uchiha, of course. It was a sad story that ended in a strange way. Naruto couldn't explain it to anyone, because no one believed him. All they knew was that he killed them, but they didn't know the story. The true story, in a condensed version, is that Izumi Uchiha was captured by a man that had given them fair warning before. Orochimaru captured the girl while she was out on a mission with her team. When the others returned with the news, Naruto was out on a mission of his own. By the time he got back, Itachi had already gone out to look for her, abandoning his status as a Konoha ninja to do so. Naruto pleaded with his father to go and assist him, which Minato reluctantly agreed. Naruto tracked his best friend to a somewhat hidden base along the outskirts of Kyusa. When he showed up, Itachi was sitting in the middle of the floor in what seemed to be an arena of sorts. Naruto called out to him, but he didn't respond. Instantly, he knew something was happening. Itachi turned on him and attacked him out of the blue. He wouldn't explain why, he just began attacking. Naruto adamantly tried to explain that he wasn't there to take him back. He tried to tell Itachi that he was there to help, but Itachi kept attacking him, making it clear that he wanted to kill him. They battled for hours on end with Naruto trying all he could to calm his friend down. In their hour-long battle, Itachi told Naruto of the circumstances set for him by the Snake Sannin. He gave him an ultimatum, either kill Naruto Namikaze or he would kill Izumi. Naruto nearly convinced him that if they were to work together, they could kill the snake and save her. But, luckily, Orochimaru showed up with a knife to the girl's throat. Itachi knew that the only way to save her was to do what the man said and kill his friend. Even though his heart was heavy, he kept fighting. Izumi's pleading in the background held most of his attention. The battle could have gone on forever with Naruto just dodging Itachi's attacks. Naruto at first thought it was a poor plan by the snake for the simple fact that he held no leverage over him. What drove the point home that this was supposed to be a death match is the next person he brought out. A bound and gagged Mito with tears streaming down her face. Right away, Naruto couldn't figure out how the slimy man could have gotten a hold of her. He tried to hurry the snake at first to get her back. In doing so, a barrier shot up around the room, officially setting the arena as the snake kicked his feet up to watch the spectacular battle that was bound to happen. It was a great fight, and neither of them held back as they fought for their hearts, influenced by the wails of crying coming from the two girls to save them. Eventually, Naruto got the upper hand and was able to kill his friend. The last thing Itachi saw before he died was Izumi's throat being slit. Naruto's soul broke completely when he saw his two best friends die, and one of them was killed by him. Never before had a kill made him feel so cold. The only way he could keep himself together was the thought of him saving his sister. That illusion broke as well. When the barrier dropped, Naruto looked up to the balcony to see not one, but two cynical smiles staring down at him. Orochimaru chuckled at the blonde's confusion. Naruto's teary eyes were plastered on Mito as she shared the same smile while standing next to the snake. To his shock and horror, her appearance changed into a man he read about in the bingo books. Not famously known, but an ability very impressive. 100 Transformation Kazan. Orochimaru and his associate escaped before the barrier fell. By the time it did, the heartbroken Naruto had no will or strength left to search for the duo. Instead, he carried the bodies of his friends all the way back to the village. Upon arrival, the people mourned the death of the village-famous couple. The answers to their questions were needed. It was meant to be confidential. But a leak from the ANBU guarding the Hokage during Naruto's mission report began the spread of the rumor that was partially true. Within weeks, everyone knew that Naruto Namikaze killed Itachi Uchiha. They just didn't know the full story, and so, he was ostracized by everyone who admired the two. Rumors spread on why he had done it, each more ridiculous than the last. Some people say he killed Itachi because he was jealous that Itachi had Izumi and wanted him out of the way. When he did, Izumi didn't want him, so he killed her too. Another said he just snapped out of the blue. None of them correct. It made it worse that they accused his father of playing favorites, acquitting him of his crime just because he was his son. So, he was slowly going back to his old, negative way of thinking. His hope for the world slowly reduced to nothingness. His desire to live went away completely after he killed his best friend. There was no light in this world anymore. No, not for him. The lack of missions was making it worse. He had been taking them one after the other just to keep his mind busy, with the added benefit of avoiding the hateful gazes he received every day. The world was laughing at him. Every chance it got, it kicked the shit out of him with no mercy. How did he act? So, he still didn't know what he could do. It hadn't gotten to the point in which he felt he had to do something. No, he would just wait it out with a tiny bit of the naive hope he used to have that things might get better soon. All he had to do was wait. He would do that in his bed, staring at the white ceiling above him, watching as it melded seamlessly through the colors of the daylight and eventually the moonlight. Day after day, sitting in his office rubbing his temples, Minato signed another document. The recent years weighing on his mind heavily. The stress of everyone everywhere begging him to do something about one thing or another was eating him alive. He didn't know who to take seriously. The council was the worst as of recent. The latest tragedy of Itachi Uchiha's death was at the center of most of it, and consequently, so was his son. They demanded his head. Even when Minato tried to explain that Naruto's actions were legal because Itachi was basically a nuke ninja, they wouldn't listen. They wanted vengeance for the loss of Konoha's #1 ninja. They wanted him to pay for his crime, but Minato refused to give in. He wouldn't kill his own son for something he would have done if he were the one to go. Minato knew for sure that the young genius wouldn't have hesitated to kill Mito if he thought she was in danger or if he thought Mito was in danger. Sadly, most of the requests for a trial came from his close friend Fugaku. The entire Uchiha clan was stricken with grief and they demanded he pay for his crime. Minato was actually afraid of what would happen when it was all over. There were only a few ways it was bound to end, with either Naruto getting killed or the Uchiha clan packing up and leaving Konoha for good, weakening them considerably. As a father, he wanted to protect his son as best he could. But as a cage, the village always came first. It broke his heart, but if a threat such as that were to be issued, he would have to try his best and get the sentence of death reduced to possibly prison or exile. He didn't want either of them. With Naruto racking up mission after mission as he had been the past few weeks, he'd possibly have something to argue his case of freedom for. Maybe they would see reasoning with the village's current lack of manpower. He doubted it. The world was at a moment of stasis, not peace, but a great lack of major conflict that could possibly incite a war. It was quiet. Hearing reports from both Captain Yosha and Inoichi gave him more to worry about. Now he was learning that his son might not be steady. That was cause for concern as well. For a skilled person like Naruto, being unstable could mean another Orochimaru case. A crazy person who was wandering around the elemental nations. No, he wouldn't believe it. His son was fine. All he needed was some sleep. As he was thinking this, a ball flew in through the window and gave off a purple gas that made the ANBU in the room fall from their places. Minato jumped to his feet with his kunai in hand, staring at the figure that jumped through the window. He went after the blonde Hokage with a hood over his face. They engaged in a brief taijutsu match before another squad of a NBU burst through the door. Minato was kicked away by the person in the hood. After getting some distance, the person in the hood ran toward the window. He threw an explosive tag at the roof above before jumping out. When he did, he looked back inside to see the blonde Hokage, who was surprised to see a face behind the cloak. His own son had done it. Unfortunately, the ANBU in the room also saw and told the others, Naruto Namikaze has attacked the Hokage. They then pushed through the falling debris to find the blonde teen and arrest him. Minato was still stunned by what had happened. This one couldn't be hidden. He just couldn't believe Naruto would attack him so carelessly. He could have easily caught him just then, but his shock wouldn't let him move. He couldn't understand what had happened. Or maybe he could, but he just refused to believe it. Naruto was still staring at his ceiling, like he had been doing all day, when he heard someone quietly come into his house. As a trained ANBU agent, he heard it clearly and pulled out a kunai, ready for whoever tried to attack him. He could hear things in his house moving or changing because of someone else. He waited around the corner, completely calm, for whoever it was to rush in. When they did, he killed them right away, until he saw that it was one of his own ANBU agents. A guy he knew, more specifically. Right away, he dropped the kunai he was holding and fell to the ground, yelling no over and over again. No, 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 hey, hey, he said, putting pressure on the cut in his neck to stop the blood from flowing out. His hand was glowing green with medical chakra, but before he could heal the wound, a group of NBU agents tackled him to the ground. With his face pressed against the floor, he looked down the hall and saw himself sitting in the window at the end. With the smirk, his eyes got a lot bigger and the face changed into a random person and jumped away. His cries to go after the real criminal were muffled by a knee in the face. He tried harder and harder to get into a position where he could at least talk. But as soon as he did, the ANBU on his back gave him a chop to the back of his neck, putting him to sleep. His headband was then taken off. Naruto's body was slumped over on his knees in the middle of a room full of people who hated him. His father was looking at him with a sad face, and Naruto just stared blankly at the ground. The room was quiet as everyone waited for the long-awaited verdict. Naruto had been held in the ANBU prison for the past 2 months while he made his own case to defend himself before the council. He explained every assumption he arrived at, even re-explaining the situation involving Itachi's death. The council members had different ideas. Most of the people he told his story to were not scared. But the clan heads and higher-ups seemingly understood, if even a little. Fugaku said that understanding and forgiving were two different things. When he told them what he thought happened the night he was being charged for, he said that he saw 100 transformation Kazan leave the scene while he was being detained. The only thing he couldn't figure out was why the man did what he did. The only thing he could think of was that the man might want to ruin his life. The council would not accept such a runaround excuse, so his only possible explanation was seen as unreliable. Now, all they could do was wait for the inevitable punishment. Minato got up and didn't try to hide the pain of his duty. Naruto Namikaze, you have been sentenced to life in prison for trying to kill your cage and killing a fellow Konoha shinobi. As he spoke, his voice got softer and softer. Even after everything was said and done, the room was still very quiet. I'm so sorry, son. 2 ANBU guards were dragging Naruto away, and the only sound was the clanking of his chains. This time, we're going to the real jail. One hellish month fell into a new cycle that was much worse than the last. But he couldn't help it because his biggest fans, the Uchiha clan, ran the prison. Fugaku had hoped that knowing what happened the day Itachi died would be enough to at least make peace. But the last few weeks have shown him that it wasn't. On his first night there, he felt more alone than he ever had before. He wasn't immediately put with the other prisoners. Instead, he was taken to one of the lower levels' empty divisions. There, the guards thought he needed to learn a lesson. Sure, he could have fought back and probably killed them, but he decided there was no point. It would do him no good anyways. For the first few days, they beat him very badly, taking turns to get out their anger and get back at their clan's fallen prodigy. His daily suffering was made worse by the fact that he didn't get proper care or even the bare necessities. He was only given one very bad meal a day, 2 glasses of water a day, and a shower that didn't work. For the time being, that was his cycle. When the guards had had enough fun with the blonde, he was finally moved up to the regular prison levels. His first cellmate was a man who was mad at his father for sending him to prison, as were many others. In other words, after Naruto took the beatings from the guards, he had thought they would stop. Of course, life would give him more jokes. One of them is that he will always have to take more beatings. They had their fun with him whenever they felt as though they wanted to hit something. And when staring at a wall was your main activity, you always wanted to hit something. The guards never paid attention to what was going on, whether it was in the courtyard, the cafeteria, or the hallway. They would always stand back and watch until his attacker got tired before bringing back order. People who really didn't like him were given the lower floor so they could have fun for as long as they wanted. They were trying to kill him down there. Naruto Namikaze finally lost his mind down there. While he was down there, one of the attackers came up with the idea to drown him in the shower water, even though he knew the problem that made the lower levels inaccessible. There was a reason why the lower floors weren't used anymore. They used the same pipes that the old lab of the Snake Sannin used. Before he ran away, he dumped his poisonous chemicals through pipes. That day, it led to the deaths of hundreds of prisoners. That wasn't the case for Naruto, though. His Uzumaki blood seemed to allow him to fend off the internal effects it caused. But it did well in changing his appearance. Not very much, but enough to turn the hair on his body blood red. Ironically, he looked like he was born with the same color as his mother and sister. It was just another bad thing that happened to him, but this one broke him. The men stood around his broken body and laughed as he threw the black liquid off of himself. Thinking back to his favorite book that he was no longer able to read, he realized something. The book was right on all counts. Everything it said made perfect sense. Everyone around him was making fun of him. It was kicking dirt in his face and laughing its ass off. Everyone else around him was ready to help. They noticed him right away when he did something bad. But they forgot about him when he tried to be a good person or a hero. No matter what he did, people ignored him as if he didn't exist. It was at that moment, as he kneeled on the floor with his skin burning, and black liquid still pouring out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. He ran his hands through his newly red hair, which was still covered in the murky black liquid, and held his hair to his head. He laughed. He laughed like he was crazy, which made the men around him freeze almost instantly. They listened to nothing but his laughter as he laughed. One of them, who had been kicking his behind all day, felt brave enough to step up and kick him in the face. When his leg was close enough, Naruto grabbed his ankle with an iron grip and kept tightening it. He wasn't laughing anymore. He broke the man's leg with a violent jerk of his wrist. Only the man's screams broke the silence in the empty prison cell. The four men who were still there got into fighting positions when they saw that he was finally going to fight back. Only one of them was smiling, because he was also an ANBU agent and thought he could beat him. The others weren't as sure. Two of them barely made it to the rank of Chunin, and one of them barely made it to Genin. Naruto stood up with his back to the group, not caring at all that the man next to him was trying to crawl away while screaming bloody murder. He was still wiping the black water off of himself in a casual way. He pulled a hair down and looked at how blood red it was. He liked. That is weird, he said with a gassed-out laugh that didn't do much to calm their nerves. The former leader of the ANBU was sick of waiting. Now was his best chance to attack. He leaped forward intent on delivering a kick to his back. Naruto sidestepped the attack and grabbed the off-balanced man in a choke hold. Without a moment's hesitation, he snapped his neck with a nauseating cracking sound. When he dropped the body to the ground, the other two lost faith in their chances of defeating him. Their only chance was to make a run for the door to get the attention of a guard. When they took off running, Naruto slowly turned around and began walking their way. Passing by the whimpering man with the freshly broken leg, he stepped on his injured appendage, inciting another hell-curdling scream from him. Don't go too far now. I'll be right back. Kihahaha. The two men made it to the metal door and began beating on it repeatedly, begging for someone to open the door. The guard that was usually at the top of the stairs wasn't there this time. Turning around, they saw the red-haired teen, still partially covered in the black water, casually strolling their way. In urgency, they began hitting it harder and harder, trying to break the door down. Naruto strolled towards the two in apparent amusement, a small grin plastered on his lips and an intense look in his eyes. Watching the two men fight for their lives was amusing him in some sick way. Even more so when they turned to face him. Resolve in their eyes and a will to live, they charged, one after the other, and died in the same order. With those two handled, he casually walked back to the last man standing. Well, crawling. The man was still on the floor with his head tucked against his forearms and his body trembling. Naruto grabbed the man by his broken leg and swung him around until his body crashed into one of the cell doors. His fit of screaming tuned up to another level completely. Naruto squatted down to gaze into his eyes. In doing so, the man tried to throw a swing at him. Naruto caught his fist with his left hand and with his right, jabbed him in the bicep. When that appendage dropped lifeless, the man pulled the shank he was hiding up his left sleeve and slashed at him. Naruto easily disarmed him, disabling that arm as well. The man regretted his actions almost immediately as he watched the blonde twirl it in his hands, examining its quality. You brought me a toy, he said, taking the blade in his hand. When he suddenly stopped, the man looked him in the eye with more fear than he was expecting. Naruto's visage became softer, almost sincere. What's wrong? You were laughing at me just a moment ago, he said. You don't look good with a frown. Let me fix that. Hey ha ha ha. Grabbing the man by his hair, he stuck the blade in his mouth and gave him a partial Glasgow smile. There, now even in your grave, you'll be smiling. With that, he slit his throat and watched the blood pour out in a steady stream. Then, he sat there in the middle of his heinous crime and waited patiently for the guards to return to 5 dead prisoners and a new man, laughing at the ironic turn of events. Marking this day as the day he finally lost his mind, and lost himself, the day he simply laughed back. There was no longer a Naruto Namikaze. That boy was gone. Now, all that remained was no one. On the 3rd floor of the Konoha maximum security prison, 3 men fought their way down the hall, passing cage after cage of men who deserved to be there. One was a skinny man with brown hair who was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He was being pushed along by 2 Uchiha guards who were having a hard time. The prisoner looked very scared, and he begged the guards very hard not to make him go where they were taking him. He tried everything to stop him from moving. As he went by, he dropped to the ground and pushed his feet against the walls and railings. When he walked by their cells, the men laughed and said things that were meant to make him feel better, but only made him more scared. He yelled, "Oh, come on, please," and pushed back as hard as he could against the 2 men. "Kami, please, I beg you," he pleaded, but they didn't listen as they dragged him away to the very last cell, which was next to 3 empty cells. Even though the man begged to be put in one of these, they had orders and followed them, throwing him into the cell and locking the door. The man got up quickly and ran to the cage, where he tried to open the door before the guard locked it. He said, "No, please," and grabbed the bars as they walked away. Soon, he was left alone and could only hear the other prisoners talking in the distance. Even though he was scared, he wouldn't turn around. Taps could be heard coming from behind him. He tried not to make a sound, as he had been told to do before he was brought in. The way he was shaking his lip let the smallest of whimpers come out of his mouth. For the time being, he focused on that. When he heard a whistle that was meant to get his attention, his heart skipped a beat. He couldn't think straight as he tried to figure out what his chances were. If he didn't turn around, it would be rude. But if he did, they had only heard stories about what would happen. He turned around slowly because he knew he would have to face his fears at some point. The cell had the same basic layout as the others. There was a bunk bed on the right side, a toilet in the back left corner, a sink against the back wall, and a small table and chairs bolted to the floor in the middle. His new red-haired cellmate was sitting in the seat across from him. He was holding a deck of cards and tapping on the table in rhythms of 3. He only looked at the skinny man in front of him with a very intense look in his eyes, following him around like he was the most interesting thing in the world. "Hello," he said in a low voice. "It looks like we'll be sharing a cell now." The man tried as hard as he could to tighten his quivering lip as much as he could. He kept his hands close to his chest to protect himself, and he wouldn't look into the redhead's steely eyes. He had to force himself to answer, so he whispered out, "Seems like it." His voice was so full of fear that he was angry with himself for even trying. The redhead gave him a smile. "Hey, are you interested in being my friend?" The council room was again full of people who were getting very frustrated with the case they were talking about, which was the sentencing of Naruto Namikaze. Since they got back home, his family has brought up the case every month with new questions and arguments. Minato kept bringing up the case because it was his choice which cases they talked about every time they got together. Their society was a military dictatorship, so they couldn't speak out against his decision, unless it was a special case like the imprisonment of a shinobi, which was the issue at hand. Kushina, Menma, and Mito, along with Jiraiya, were sitting at a table in the middle of the room, right in front of the main council members. All of them were there to argue for or against something. Kushina pulled out cards on which she had written facts about the case and said, "All I'm saying is that it doesn't make sense. I mean, Naruto said that Kazan's 100 transformation was what made him look like him. So why wasn't Kazan looked for when you got this information?" Danzo Shimura was in charge of the meeting, and Minato agreed with him. Minato knew that the case was too personal for him to make a good decision. "We didn't find out about that until the morning after the attack. By then, he would have been close to the edge of the land of fire. So you didn't even consider the possibility that he might have been telling the truth?" she asked in shock. He said, "Don't be stupid, of course we did." Namikaze's claim about why he might have done it was too silly to be taken seriously. Jiraiya stood up at this point. "I agree, but I would argue that the kid was too upset to give a good reason." "So you're saying you have one?" Hamura, who was standing next to him, asked. "Actually, I do. You see, Itachi Uchiha's death is connected to this. Kazan pretended to be his sister to get him to fight Itachi. At the time, he was working with Orochimaru. He let that hang in the air for a few seconds." Danzo pushed him to say more quickly. "Jiraiya, what are you trying to say?" Jiraiya yelled, "It's Orochimaru," as if the case was clear as day. "I mean, really, don't you know why he does what he does?" Fugaku asked from his place, "And what would that reason be?" He said, "He wants him. He wants to turn him into a monster because he saw what he could be." Danzo didn't seem at all convinced. "We are not here to guess at motives. Even if we accepted your stupid guess, Naruto Namikaze has solidified his position in prison. He has killed a Konoha shinobi and 28 other people, including 3 guards, while in jail. Self-defense," Kushina said back right away. From what Naruto knows, Hayate-san was in Naruto's house without permission, and as a shinobi, he had every right to kill all of them. He even said that he killed Naruto by accident, she said before Danzo could argue. The guards who found the scene found Naruto himself being beaten and tortured with chemicals. Danzo said, "That doesn't mean anything." He turned to the man and said, "Inoichi-san, please tell us about your last psychological evaluation with the prisoner in question." Inoichi moved around in his seat a little because he was worried about putting his friend's sons in danger. He coughed into his hand and said, My evaluation with Naruto Namikaze was very helpful. If I had to describe him, I'd say he was very off his rocker. He talked about random things, and his personality had changed a lot since the last time I talked to him." "Inoichi, don't beat around the bush," Danzo told him. "Tell them what you told me. They need to know." The man was cursed by Inoichi. He felt sorry for the man's family and looked down into their eyes. Naruto Namikaze showed a lot of signs of psychopathy when he talked about what he wanted to do if he were ever freed. He talked about things like killing a lot of people and starting wars. The others, including Kushina, couldn't believe it. It was not the case. Jiraiya asked, "What do you mean by signs of psychopathy?" Well, when evaluating someone, we start with basic questions to find out how they're feeling. Based on their answers, we decide if they need the test. Naruto's answers had nothing to do with the questions being asked, so I asked him more hypothetical questions to see how he responded. His answers were, well, to say the least, confusing. So you thought he was crazy because he gave you indirect answers to your questions? Jiraiya asked in a deadpan voice. He replied, well, it's not quite that simple. The questions are meant to get them going, to make them feel like they're losing control. When they feel like they're losing control, they will either act violently or find some other way to get it back in their favor. Mito finally joined the conversation and yelled, that doesn't prove anything. Naruto Nyai is just smart. Yes, he is, Inoichi said next. That's why he knew he could turn the conversation in his favor. In addition to the mental battle we had, he also had unbalanced physical tendencies. Jiraiya made a joke. What? Did he shake his leg too fast? Inoichi didn't care about what was said and went on. No, it was more subtle things. For example, he, only blinked once, he said. His family just looked at him in shock and asked him if he was serious. Our talk lasted 2 hours, he said to explain. Look, Kushina, I'm very sorry about what's going on with your family right now, but I've never seen Naruto's eyes look like that. He's not the same boy he was when you left. If you keep trying to get Naruto released, and you succeed, I fear for all of us. Kushina's face showed that she was sad. She looked at the table her hands were on and thought about what he had said. No words to say in response to what was said. He tried to make her son look bad. Was she going to say? Danzo looked down at the group in the middle of the room and said, don't worry, Inoichi. Naruto Namikaze will never be able to get out of that jail. He'll do it, Fugaku said, surprising everyone. Everyone looked at him in surprise. Was he on Kushina's side? Naruto is too dangerous to keep in the prison. He has talked 7 of his former cellmates and nearby inmates into killing themselves. It has gotten to the point where we had to clear out 6 of the cells next to his to stop it from happening again. With the prison being overcrowded, you can see how that is a problem. When Minato finally joined the conversation, he asked, so where else do you think we should put him? He thought about it. Minato shook his head, so he said, well, if we decide he's a lost cause, we can send him to Hazuki Castle. He said, or he could be moved to the asylum and put in the care of Inoichi. It's a less stressful place, but the same techniques could be used to keep him in check. All the cells are kept separate, and he would get the right care he needs. Minato thought as he looked down. It was a lot better than prison, but if Naruto was a threat to the prisoners, would it be smart to put him in a place where they had almost as much freedom as they did in prison? He looked at the man and said, I'll let Inoichi make the choice. Inoichi thought as he looked down. He nodded his head and said, I have a strange feeling that I should probably say no, but I guess it would be best. Danzo interrupted. He said, for that to be possible, there must be limits, since he is still in jail. Minato nodded begrudgingly as he had given him authority over the case. Namikaze won't be able to talk to the other people there, and he won't be able to do anything fun because he's not a patient. He's a prisoner. Might I suggest a 2-hour psychological session as well? Total isolation could cause more harm and aggression than is recommended for someone of Naruto's skills. Inoichi said. Danzo said, the 2-hour session is okay. If possible, get him mentally stable enough to be moved back to prison. His skills won't be a problem because he has a complex seal blocking his chakra that was made by the Nidaime himself to keep prisoners in check. It has held up for years. Inoichi nodded, blowing out a sigh with clear worry riddling his tone. Hold on, Fugaku said. Who will you have undergo his evaluations? Well, I have a staff full of capable psychologists, most of which were trained by me personally. They are all highly capable, he answered. Fugaku gave him a look that did nothing to settle his nerves. I'd advise putting only your best, preferably yourself, he said, giving no further information. Finally tired of holding their tongues, Kushina spoke up. Hang on, don't we get a say in this? She asked. I am afraid not, Danzo said. Your argument today was pushing for your son's release. That is not and will not ever happen. Furthermore, Naruto Namikaze will have no visitors, other than those granted special clearance, as he is still a prisoner of capital offense. He will have the same lack of laws he would have had within the prison, he said with finality that enraged the redhead beyond belief. That is the final result of this meeting, Hokage-sama. Minato stared at the top edge of his podium with a disappointed look as well. He was of course unsatisfied with the verdict, but was already plotting strong points for the next argument that was most likely going to take place next month. He was the Hokage, so he decided on whatever case he chose to, no matter how many times he chose to do so. If that is all, everyone is dismissed, he said, standing up himself. Kushina was putting the papers and forms she had brought back into the folder while staring angrily at Danzo, who gave her the same look. This isn't over yet, she told him as she and the others left the room. Danzo just snorted at her remark. And sure, the Namikaze house was subdued in utter silence. Mito, Menma, Jiraiya, and Kakashi sat around the table listening to the aggressive cooking taking place in the kitchen. Mito and Menma still silently arguing as to not disturb the others, stuck in the thought of their defeat. Jiraiya was thinking of things they could use for the next case but was drawing complete blanks. Everything he came up with somehow found a way to counter itself or was seen as invalid due to some of the things already discussed. This was extremely important to him and the others could tell. They might want to think it was all for Naruto, but it wasn't. He loved the boy, but this was also a chance to finally get Konoha to actively search for and apprehend his old teammate or even kill. He's known Orochimaru for years, and if he's learned one thing, it's that he is a very patient person. No matter how long he had to wait, he would see his plans come true, and Jiraiya was afraid of what that could mean with a mind like his. Minato walked into the silence, knowing full well he was expecting it. He hung his cloak up and made his way through the dining room, greeting everyone on the way by. When he walked into the kitchen, Kushina was chopping vegetables so hard that she was cutting into the cutting board. He walked up next to her, getting her attention. We moved forward. Chopping even harder, she replied instantly. Heh, progress, she mocked. What fucking progress? We got him sent to a house full of wackos and sick people. How great. That's not what I meant, Minato said, looking down in thought. We've gotten the backing of a few more of the clan heads. What good is that now that you put that one-eyed fucker in charge of everything? She asked him, spitting out the term she used for Danzo with venom. Minato rubbed his face. Look, I had to. Shikaku thought it would be a good idea. He said a few of the clan heads were siding against us because they thought I was playing favorites. So, I bet if it were one of their kids they'd do the same. Fucking thing, she said louder, splitting the cutting board in half. Minato walked up and gently pulled the knife from her hand. Calm down, calm down. Look, it's not over. We'll bring the case back up next month, and we will keep bringing it up until we have him back, he said, rubbing her arms to soothe her stress. We will get him back, I promise. Kushina's body just slumped against his, trying her hardest to keep faith in his words. After a year of doing this, it felt like she couldn't believe him, and with Inoichi's statement, she knew the situation got a lot harder. 4 armed Uchiha guards as well as Fugaku himself walked down the halls of the prison towards the last cell, walking past the cells of men sitting in a shocked silence the further they went. One of them holding a load of equipment that jingled with every step. Finally making it to the last cell, they peered inside to see a sight that was disturbing. Naruto sat in the chair on the opposite side of the table facing them, and his cellmate beating his head on the wall. Blood splatter dripping down the wall in front of him. Kario, get him and take him to the infirmary, Fugaku said as they opened the cell. Naruto stared at Fugaku in amusement. Ah, Fugaku-sama, it's been a while, he said with a small smile resting on his lips, his eyes barreling into the Uchiha leaders with such intensity it was unsettling. What is the reason for this visit? He asked him casually. Fugaku and the others stepped into the cell. The one with the equipment timidly walked around the table and got behind the redhead, pulling him to his feet. You are being moved to the asylum as you have become too dangerous to remain in this prison, Fugaku explained. While there, you will have the same lack of rights you have here, he said, repeating the words of Danzo. He threw him a set of white clothes to further accent that this was no joke. You think I'm crazy, he said with a smile as he held up the clothes. Fugaku crossed his arms, but he didn't feel afraid of the intense look. What I think is of no importance. An expert has deemed you a certified psychopath. Put him on, he demanded. Naruto just smiled at him and said, I like orange better. I don't care, he said, keeping his serious face. Naruto chuckled and removed his clothes and slipped into the white uniform. When he finished, his arms were bounded tightly behind his back and his feet were shackled together. An expert, so Inoichi-san thinks I'm crazy, he said with a smile. Before he could say anything else, his mouth was covered with a muzzle so he couldn't talk. Aside from that, your actions within my facility have been a hindrance to my staff and the functioning of the prison. You will be moved to the asylum where you will have no contact with the patients and no recreational time. In addition, you will attend a 2-hour-long session with a psychologist every day, he informed him. He couldn't see it, but he just knew the redhead was smiling. The 2 Uchiha guards on either side of him grabbed onto his elbows and began ushering him out the cell and down the hall. On the way, his casual gaze peered into the cells of the men still frozen in silence as they watched the psychopath being led down the hall, all of them noticing the white get-up and finding it fitting. Fugaku was amazed by how much fear he was able to instill in the men of their horrible nature. Naruto was like a monster to these monsters, and it only ensured him that he should never be allowed to roam free. The 3 Uchiha police officers pushed him out the front door of the prison and led him through the backwoods of the village for about a mile to the psychiatric ward. Naruto didn't struggle in the slightest. He played visual mind games with the ward's staff that were heading back to the village in the opposite direction, giving them playful gazes and eye smiles that were completely unsettling. Finally arriving at the asylum, Inoichi was already waiting at the door with 2 of his biggest staff members ready to take over from there. Naruto gave the blonde man an amused look from behind his muzzle, his concentrated gaze boring into his skull with unknown intentions. The Uchiha guards handed off the prisoner to the 2 workers as Fugaku greeted Inoichi. Shaking the timid man's hand, he gave his parting words. "Best of luck, Inoichi," he said lowly. As Inoichi and his clansmen walked away from the man, he let out a sigh and nodded his head. Inoichi walked in front, leading the 2 guards and his new prisoner. Naruto looked around at the new scenery of all white while he was being pushed along. It was a new experience in contrast to the usual gray walls he was used to. A blinding one at that. They passed hallway after hallway, passing many rooms and offices. Making it to the stairs, they climbed up 3 flights before finally stepping back into a hall. In the distance, Naruto could hear chatter. As he was pushed along, they passed by what he assumed was the recreational center, as there were a bunch of white-clothed patients doing various tasks inconsistent to what it looked like they would be doing. Like the 2 men at the chess table who were either bored and staring into space or sleeping. He was pushed along until he could no longer see them. After that, it was more white halls with patients being led down the hall or back into their rooms. He received looks of fear from more than a few of the ward employees on the way by, which was familiar of course. At the end of the hall, there was a single room that was far from the others and had his name on it. Inoichi pulled out his keys and unlocked the metal door. They walked the blonde in and halted him in the middle of the room. Inoichi pulled out a needle and flicked it twice. He stuck it in Naruto's neck and his body began to slump forward. 2 guards grabbed him and carried him to the corner, where they put him down on a pad. Inoichi pulled out the keys Fugaku gave him and removed the cuffs and shackles from the redhead. When he was done, another one of his workers came in with a straitjacket, which they put on Naruto's body. "Will that be all, Dr. Yamanaka?" asked one of the workers standing next to him as he looked down at Naruto. He turned around with a sigh and a nod. "Yes, that is all. Return to your tasks," he said, ushering them out before stepping out himself and locking the metal door. It always pained him to see someone he's known since they were children end up in this place. It happened all too often for his liking. Sitting in a room with metal chairs and a metal table, all bolted to the floor, Naruto stared up into the dangling light above. His straitjacket was held in place by chains that went all the way to the floor. He was sat down a few hours earlier by 2 of the workers and was told to wait for his session to begin. When the door finally opened, Inoichi walked in with a vanilla folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, so he could use his free hand to close the door. He walked over to Naruto without even looking in his direction yet. He put his things down when he sat down and looked at the blonde. Already, Naruto's intense eyes were on him, and he had a small smile on his lips. Inoichi didn't care about the look and took a notepad and a pen out of his pocket. "Good morning, Naruto. I will be handling your psychological sessions for the time being. I would like to start out by asking you some simple questions," Naruto said with a laugh. "I think we've already done this, Inoichi-san. Don't tell me that you need to reassess me now." Inoichi gave a slight nod. He turned a few pages and said, "These are not the same questions." Naruto waited patiently with his smile fading in and out. "Now, do you know what you are doing here?" "Well, an expert," he said with a hint of amusement, "has deemed me clinically insane." Inoichi didn't respond to what was said. "It's a little more complicated than that," he said. "Naruto, I'm not here to treat you like a criminal. Okay, I've been on your side since before your trial." Naruto just laughed and nodded. "I want to help you," he said seriously. Naruto looked up and thought, "Ugh, if only I could believe you," he said in false exasperation. "And why can't you?" Naruto shifted in his seat, giving Inoichi a confused look and a smile. He said it in a witty way. "Well, you told me not to." When Inoichi heard what was said, he raised an eyebrow. He hadn't said anything like that. Naruto rolled his eyes in a funny way when he saw how confused he was. "Come on, I know it only made it to paperback, but still." Inoichi was still as confused as possible. This was an example of what he meant in the trial when he said Naruto's topics would bounce around sporadically. Now it seemed as if he were on a completely different subject altogether. Well, that's what he thought until Naruto explained further. The biggest sin of a man at war is his unquestioning belief in the enemy's words. It is a psychological disadvantage for a person who has seen enough tragedy to trust things he hears that promise an end. If he is told of a possible end to the war, he will believe it without questioning where the information came from. It is a shinobi's duty to fight this urge. Inoichi Yamanaka, The Psychology of War. Naru. Inoichi's eyes widened ever so slightly when he realized what he was talking about. You've read my book, he stated in surprise. Surprise because it was never very popular to those who weren't studying psychology. It was far from being a bestseller. I did, Naruto said, nodding his head. It was a real work of art. Inoichi raised an eyebrow, not expecting a compliment. Well, thank you, but I don't believe that applies to this situation. We're not at war, aren't we? Naruto asked back right away. Call it what you will, but this is war. Two sides facing off in a battle to gain the upper hand or maintain it. That is the goal here, right? He asked, upholding that same unsettling eye contact. I mean, based on what you know about me, you think I'm a psychopath who loves being in charge? He joked. Inoichi was getting a little worried because he could tell Naruto was more than just a few steps ahead of him. His many years of doing this, however, didn't give anything away, and when the redhead looked at him, he met her eyes with a look that showed he wasn't scared. Coughing into his hand, he replied, Yes, but I'm not trying to beat you. Oh, but you are. You are here for just that reason. You see, this little game of ours has the ultimate objective of control. We're in your facility. You control all things within. Patients, workers, the lights and whatnot. Naruto rhetorically asked him, receiving a nod of confirmation. Yeah, well, as hard as you may try and hide it, I can tell I threaten you. Inoichi chuckled a bit as a way to demean Naruto's statement when in truth he wasn't feeling too confident. No, I do, he accented calmly. Inoichi leaned back in his chair and put on a fake smile. He asked him, and how is that? Naruto closed his eyes and thought. Well, you are no match for me physically, and you know that. All those years of war and you couldn't beat me if you left me in this straitjacket. You know this, so you have to come up with some other method of besting me. You want to assert your dominance by displaying your prowess in something that only a handful of men have been able to best you at, mental prowess. At the end of Naruto's rant, Inoichi's fake smile of confidence fell off by accident. But now you're really starting to worry, because I'm beating you at that, too. Isn't that what war is all about? Getting the tactical edge over your enemy in every part of the fight. You're not the first person to think of war from a mental point of view, are you? He asked rhetorically. Of course, Inoichi said, nodding. Do you know of Wakata Fuji? Naruto asked. Inoichi wanted to say yes, but he knew that lying to someone as smart as Naruto could back him into a corner, so he shook his head instead. Naruto nodded and continued. Well, he was a general of Kirigakure during the Second Great Shinobi War. He wrote a book called It's a Mind Game. The book was about the stress that war puts on a man's mind, like yours. He described it as a slow process, like working on a patient, he said with a shrug. Inoichi listened carefully because he was interested in what he had to say. When war starts, the first step is to show who's in charge and make the other side less likely to attack. That was your goal when you came here today, even if you didn't know it. It's what you'd call a tactless goal. It was planned without even really thinking about it. It's a pretty clear example of the good guy, bad guy complex, he said with a laugh. How is that? Asked Inoichi in response. Wow, Naruto said with a smile and a shake of the head. You really don't see it, he said, nodding his head as if he were talking to a child. You woke up this morning thinking about this moment, so your mind simplified the situation. There are two men here, one good and one bad. In your mind, you went over different possibilities and planned out how you wanted it to go. From what you've heard about me, you expected me to be much more aggressive than I am, or you wouldn't have put chains on me, he said, leaning forward and stretching out the metal links on his back. By doing that, you planned to show me who was in charge here. You're making this guess out of thin air, Inoichi said in a foreboding way. Oh, but I'm Newt, Naruto said almost as if he were singing. You see, from the very first question, you were trying to insult my intelligence by assuming I would have a very simple idea of why I'm here. He laughed. Which I did, and your answer was, it's a little more complicated than that. That was a clear sign, he said, nodding his own head. Then you added a layer of emotional manipulation on top of that to make it look like you were on my side. That was a smart move that I'm sure has helped a lot of patients, Naruto said. But, even still, it's too elementary for a mental war of this level, and you know what they say about war. You never know who's winning until the end, he said with a smile. Inoichi asked, do you think you're going to win? Naruto only chuckled ominously. Oh ho ho, it is far from the end, he replied, leaning back in his seat. Inoichi just stood there and looked at him. He thought Naruto was mentally unstable after their last conversation. But after this one, he had a different feeling. He wasn't crazy at all. He was psychotic, but not crazy. Not really. That made things a lot worse for some reason. Minato signed another document, but he barely looked at it before rubbing his temples. His old age was starting to wear him down after all these years. Adding the drama of the constant arguments he was involved in, he was more than exhausted. It only took 4 years to surprise him and let him down at the same time. His 2 youngest children were amazed as they slowly moved up the ranks and earned their titles and respect in the village. They turned 18 a few months ago, which made him realize how quickly time was passing. It was like he blinked and they were all grown up and moving on with their lives. The rest of their youth had been spent fighting for their brother's freedom with their mother for years. Oh yes, Naruto was still locked within the asylum, now with no possible way of getting out. A bitter pill that they all had to swallow. 2 years ago, they were just about to reach a breaking point, and the council members were thinking about letting the blonde go. However, the world was against them, and the veteran psychologist Inoichi had asked to run Naruto's sessions while he was away ended up killing himself after talking to Naruto. In his suicide note, the man said with a lot of urgency that Naruto was the most crazy person he had ever worked with and that letting him go would cause more trouble than it was worth. That was all it took for the council members to tell the Hokage's wife that he would never be released because he was too dangerous to be in civilized society. Everyone in the Namikaze family was sad to hear the news, but Kushina took it the hardest, mostly because of what happened to her after the council gave her that choice. She agreed that if she got to see him one last time, she wouldn't bring up the trial again. They said yes to her request, and the next morning she went. When she got there and signed in, she was excited and sad because it would be the first time in years that she would see her son. But it would also be the last time ever. What really broke her heart was when Inoichi told her he didn't have time for guests. When she asked if letting her see him was a council order, Inoichi said he knew because he was there too. He repeated what he had already said and told her that Naruto didn't want to see her. At that moment, Kushina knew for sure that she had failed as a mother. She said that he was right because they had ignored him all those years ago, making herself believe that he had been hiding his feelings the whole time and that he really did hate them. She fell into a very deep depression that took over a year to get out of. Only the year before was she finally able to pull herself back up and stand on her own 2 feet. This was partly because their family was getting bigger. Menma, who is now an ANBU agent, realized at some point how important life was. After losing people close to him, he understood how short it could be, so he and his girlfriend, Sakura Haruno, decided that they wanted to be together forever, for as long as that forever was at least. So, they got married when they were 17. Kushina was stuck in a rut, but a little bit of happiness finally got her out of it. Then even more when she told him she was pregnant. She was also happy about Mito Namikaze and Sasuke Uchiha's official relationship. She couldn't be a part of the life of one of her kids, but the other 2 were moving on and doing great things. Every time she thought about Naruto, it hurt her heart, but she knew he was probably dead and that she was the only one to blame. But if she dwelled on the past, then she'd miss out on the present, and she'd be blind to the future. Minato was glad to see his wife back to her old self at last. After 4 long years, he was glad to see that things were getting a little bit better for them. Still, every time he thought about his oldest son, his heart hurt. As a father, he felt that he failed him. If he had been there to help Naruto from the start, he might have moved a little slower, but he would have been able to be a kid. If that had happened, he might not have met Sanin the snake and they might still be a perfect family. At this point, he lived off of what people call what-if fantasies. He dreamed about them as much as he could, as if that would make up for what he had done wrong. Minato was much better than Kushina at hiding how bad he felt. Of course, he had continuous piles of work to distract him as well. But the issue with that is that, when you appear strong, no one tries to help you. No one cared to ask him what it was like to lose a son. During Naruto's trials, he was told that he couldn't say anything because what he said was too important. Minato thought more than once about just saying screw it and demanding his release, but as Hokage during times of peace, he knew that would cause trouble for the village. When most of the clan leaders and the whole civilian council were against Naruto's freedom, he knew their response would have been as drastic as his idea of the Uchiha clan packing up and leaving the village. He knew that it would hurt the village a lot. As a father, he didn't care, but as a Kage, he had to. He had the rest of his family to think about as well. If Konoha's enemies saw a moment of weakness, they would kill them right away, so he had to sit back, watch the trial, and pray for the best. The best never came, of course, so now, he was fulfilling his duties as a Hokage, a husband, a father for his remaining two, and a future grandfather. Every time he closed his eyes, Naruto would just be another painful memory, his greatest regret in life, and his most heartbreaking failure. He hoped that he would be able to see him again before his time was up, but he didn't think that would happen. As Hokage, he had special permission to visit Naruto whenever he wanted, and he had tried to do so before. However, Inoichi told him that Naruto refused to see him and even threatened to hurt him if he was forced to. Of course, it was a slap in the face, and he didn't know why, but he didn't have to. If Naruto was happier by himself, he wasn't going to make him do anything. It still hurt like hell though. As he signed the last paper of the day, he sighed and leaned back in his chair. He stretched out his neck and turned around in his seat to look up at the night sky. Thoughts of finally retiring so that he could finally spend some time with his family. It seemed like everyone his age was doing it these days. Shikaku, Inoichi, and hell even Fugaku was getting ready to pass the strings over to Sasuke. But he wasn't quite ready to give it to his son yet. In other words, Menma wasn't ready. He had just joined ANBU the year before, so he was still learning how to do what he was told. He was a long ways away from giving them though. He thought, maybe Kakashi, and laughed to himself as he imagined the silver-haired Jonin's protests. Sighing in content one last time, he got to his feet and left his office for the night, ready to get home to his wife and put his worried mind at ease. As Ino Yamanaka, an 18-year-old doctor who took after her father and looked a lot like him, stood at the front desk to ask for another patient. It was the most exciting thing that had happened in the asylum all day. The skinny man behind it adamantly trying to tell her there were no more as they were all booked. There is no freaking way, she yelled out incredulously. He shook his head in a sad way. I'm sorry, Dr. Yamanaka, but they were all cleaned out this morning. Ibiki-san made sure they were all taken care of for the next month, he said. She was angry. Yes, he said he'd save one for me, she said. The man just looked around and shrugged his shoulders. No more clipboards were left. It was only her second week, but things were already going wrong. Last week was the first time she came here, but her stay was cut short by a last-minute mission that needed her skills. This had been her goal for years. Her father would never let her come with him to even scout the place as he said it wasn't her time to be there. He wouldn't even talk about the cases because doing so would break the doctor-patient rule of confidentiality. She was ready to show that she was a good psychologist now that she was here. Inoichi had tried to talk her out of the job by saying she was too sensitive to deal with all the crazy people inside. At first, she was inclined to agree with him, but then he added that she would be better off working in a flower shop, picking daisies and other flowers, to emphasize his point. That was not what you said to Ino Yamanaka. How dare he make fun of her skill as a kunoichi in that way? She told him she was going to a psychologist whether he helped her or not. So, she took off in her pursuit to prove him wrong for what he said, and after a few weeks, her rage-filled journey to attest his belittling statements slowly turned into her new passion. She wanted to help the different kinds of people who were in there. That's all she wanted to do was help them. It's been 2 weeks since she received her official status as a psychiatric doctor, and she had yet to have a true case. She had 2 dates last week that were so easy that she would have thought the men were acting the whole time. She wanted something that would test her skill and prove her father wrong at the same time. That's when her eyes landed on one more clipboard. In the far back of the administrative office, her trained eyes locked onto it. The man turned towards it, unsure of whose it was as well. He walked back over to it and pulled it from the basket it was in. He read its content over, unsure why it was put in the back room like that. When he saw the date it was last filled out, he let out a low whoa. Ino waited until she ran out for him to tell her what it was. What's that? It's an older case. Man, look at this rap sheet, he said, looking at the list of highly respected doctors that had worked on it. Hey, I think your father worked on this one, he said, walking back over to her. Guess he didn't do any better. Ino grabbed the clipboard out of his hands and looked at the part he was talking about without even looking at the top. There were a ton of people she knew, from her father to even Anko, but the last name was the one that caught her eye right away. Doctor, this was the last case for Anayo Yager, the man who killed himself 2 years ago. The case that pushed him over the edge. When she saw the name Naruto Namikaze at the top of the form, her heart dropped almost right away. Maybe it was in the back for a reason, the man said, looking at the reactions play out on her face. When she didn't answer, he reached out and tried to take it from her. Here, Alju, she shouted no, a bit louder than she meant to. When she saw how strange he looked, she shook her head a little and then calmed down. Hey, I mean, no, I'll take the case, she said as she put it on the counter and signed below Dr. Yager's name.
This was it for today. I will continue this movie in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.